You'd think I'm joking if I said there's laughter amidst the bombs and gunfire. But really, this war began like a true comedy, with the leading actor none other than Volodymyr Zelensky. Yes, that's right, the man who was once famous for his comedy career, now stepping onto the biggest stage of all, the global political arena, and turning it into a show nobody wants to watch, yet can't take their eyes off. The story opens with a bitter scene. Ukraine is struggling in the throes of war, people losing their homes, their loved ones, the entire country on the brink of collapse under pressure from all sides. Yet, on TV screens and in international press conferences, there's the image of a president constantly acting. Each speech, each gesture, seems like he's starring in the next season of his own soap opera. But unfortunately, this time there's no script, no director, just the harsh reality of lives lost and the future of an entire nation hanging in the balance. Zelensky, once hailed as the hero of freedom, is now called by many Ukrainians the hero of the nation's dissolution. A bitter phrase, but not a joke. It's the sigh of those who feel their homeland is being turned into a pawn, not to win, but to serve the interests of someone thousands of miles away. Everything started heating up in early May, right when a shady deal between the US and Ukraine was quietly signed. No fanfare, but enough to make anyone following the situation stand up in alarm. The Americans, led by pragmatic politicians like Trump, always know how to sweet-talk their way through every action, even if behind it is a clever takeover. Trump may proudly call it a foreign policy achievement, but for Ukrainians, it marks the beginning of an ongoing. And so, the stage was set. The main character steps out, still with that familiar charm and persuasive voice, but this time, the audience isn't clapping. They're crying, because war is not a performance, and Ukraine is no movie set. Just as things were cooling down, an unexpected game changer happened. Not on the front lines, but in a cozy, air-conditioned conference room. On April 30th, while the Vietnamese were commemorating the liberation of the South, a symbol of independence and freedom from foreign chains, on the other side of the globe, Ukraine's President Zelensky was signing something that would make his people choke, an agreement handing over the country's mineral resources to the US. No, you're not mistaken. With the country still smelling of gunpowder, with the citizens uncertain of tomorrow, the president sat down and signed a lucrative deal, with the Americans, of course. You might think it's humanitarian aid or emergency relief. Nope, this was a mineral deal. It sounds like something out of a Discovery Channel documentary, but tragically, it's the real wealth of the nation being traded like a promotional item. The deal said Ukraine would keep the profits for the first 7 years, then split it with the US. Sounds fair, right? But in reality, the US isn't losing much. They don't need to commit to protecting Ukraine from Russia, don't mention NATO, and don't promise continued weapon support if things get worse. They just need to sit back and wait for their share. Under leaders like Donald Trump, the US knows exactly how to calculate the best deal. And this time, they didn't need any complex schemes. A few lines in the agreement were all it took for Zelensky to offer up the gold of his motherland. Whoever controls the resources controls the game. That's an unchanging rule in every war. And yet Ukraine has tied itself to a vague contract, exchanging resources for a few uncertain promises. What about Trump and his crew? They're probably sitting back, calling it a smart deal, even proudly declaring it a diplomatic victory. The problem is, in this smart deal, it's the Ukrainians who have no say. And after that seemingly peaceful signature, the economic future of an entire nation has been traded, not for survival, but for a distant power game. It may sound like a joke, but it's happening for real. Ukraine, caught in the middle of a war, is gambling everything on empty promises from the US. And the one holding the cards? None other than President Zelensky, once a comedian, now playing the role of a leader in a script that doesn't seem to have been written by him. After shaking hands with the US, Zelensky seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if he had just found a trustworthy protector in the middle of the storm. The dream was beautiful, that the US would shield Ukraine from Russia, that this would be the key to survival for a country on the brink. But life is not like the movies, especially not American ones. And then, out steps Donald Trump. Still the same familiar style of boasting, He pats himself on the back, calling the deal with Ukraine a great diplomatic achievement during his second term, one he's not even guaranteed to get. With Trump, everything can turn into a show. The nation is suffering? No worries, as long as the visuals look good. A country losing its sovereignty? Just call it a smart strategy and people will buy it. But what's the reality? The US never made any firm promises. No commitment to protect Ukraine if Russia attacks. No NATO membership. No guarantees. Just some empty words. And the US is really good at saying one thing and doing another, especially under the leadership of players like Trump, who only care about filling their pockets, leaving others to deal with the consequences. Ironically, most of the minerals Zelensky is so eager to cooperate with the US on are in areas controlled by Russia. That means Ukraine is signing a deal to share resources that it might not even hold on to. A bizarre move, and if it's not naivety, it can only be reckless overconfidence. So people are asking, is this cooperation, or is it a type of surrender wrapped in sugar? Zelensky is betting his entire country on a friend who has abandoned many allies before and is being maneuvered by cold calculations from afar. The sad truth is, when this gamble ends, the price Ukraine will pay may not just be its resources, but the very future of its people. The story of the agreement between the US and Ukraine seemed to end after Zelensky's signature. But no, this is just the first chapter of a complicated and mysterious novel. Things started to unravel when a candid member of the European Solidarity Party, Irina Yashchenko, spoke out. She claimed that the government had hidden important annexes to the agreement, documents that no one outside the leadership has seen, but which could affect the fate of the entire nation. Inside them, no one knows what's there: indefinite obligations, irrevocable commitments, or a series of clauses that could trap Ukraine in an inescapable spiral. Sounds like a political mess, right? It certainly is. But what's even stranger, Ukraine's parliament only approved the so-called framework document. What anyone reading it would think is the main agreement. The real meat, the specific commitments and obligations, was tucked away in annexes that Parliament never even touched. What does this mean? It means the country is being led down a foggy path, with the people and lawmakers left behind, only hearing about it when everything is already set in stone. What angered the public the most? The way the government went about it. The annexes were quietly signed beforehand, and only after that did they seek approval from Parliament. A backward process, making many ask, so who's really in charge here? The people have the right to know, Parliament has the right to scrutinize. But now, everything is already presented as a fait accompli. The Ukrainian delegation tried to excuse this, saying it was just a technical step and that Parliament will approve it later. But with an agreement that could change the country's future, such a lack of transparency feels like gambling with the nation's destiny. And if anyone still thinks this is just an administrative paperwork issue, they should think again. In this chess game, it's the Ukrainian people, the ones who will finally know the truth, who are the pawns bearing the entire burden. Meanwhile, those far away, including big friends like Trump, are just standing on the sidelines, smirking. While the people have barely caught their breath after days of bombings and shelling, Zelensky flips the total war switch. He orders the acceleration of missile and artillery production, preparing everything that can target deep within Russia's heartland. This is no longer about defense. This is a real plan for attack, targeting Russia's military command centers, some of the most heavily guarded sites in the world. The tension is palpable, and it's clear to all that this conflict has moved beyond any reasonable threshold of endurance. Then something almost unbelievable came from Zelensky himself. During a speech, he alluded to the possibility of attacking Red Square right during the May 9th Victory Day parade, a sacred day for Russia. He didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. Could it be that Zelensky is targeting the very symbolic heart of Russia at a time when top generals and leaders are standing in review? A blast there wouldn't just be destructive, it would be a declaration of war that would shake the world. This is a bold move. Direct and unapologetic, no more avoiding the confrontation, a slap in the face to Putin's regime right in front of the global community. Meanwhile, Russia unexpectedly shifts tone. They announce a ceasefire from May 8 to May 10, signaling a willingness to negotiate. A crack for peace opens. But before it can even be pushed further, Ukraine slams it shut. Zelensky and the Kyiv government remain unmoved. Rather than seizing the opportunity to engage in dialogue, they dig in, doubling down on the counter-offensive. They seem to believe that attack is the only way to turn the tide, or at the very least, to keep the world's attention fixed on Ukraine. One side extends a hand, while the other tightens its fist. The war continues, without an end in sight, with no way out. The question is, how long will this bloody chess game go on before someone calls it quits? While the world hopes for a sign of peace, Zelensky chooses a different path. Ukraine stubbornly rejects all peace proposals from Russia, despite seemingly simple conditions: relinquish sovereignty and accept Russian troops on its soil. Zelensky declares unequivocally Ukraine will never abandon its aspiration to join NATO. That is their political stance. And of course, they will never recognize the territories Russia has occupied. For him, peace cannot be built on submission. Ukraine's independence and sovereignty are not negotiable. Behind Zelensky, a formidable force continues to support him. The US and Western countries are not just standing by, they continue to pump weapons and financial aid into Ukraine without pause. Massive amounts of aid keep flowing, and Ukraine even demands more, as if the war has become an endless race. The US is not only providing weapons, but also strategic support to help Ukraine maintain its strength and continue fighting Russia. The Western world seems to have made a major commitment to this war, with Ukraine being a key player in the global political game. So the question remains, how long will this war last when neither side is willing to concede, and the world continues to pour more strength into this conflict? In the power struggle of global giants, Ukraine has ceased to be a player and has become merely a pawn. The US and the West have pushed Ukraine to the front lines as if it were their way of sending a strong message to Russia. But the price has been entirely borne by the Ukrainian people, who are living in a war zone, while Western leaders simply sign agreements and provide aid from a distance. The war has dragged on for over 2 years, resources are depleting, and trust is diminishing. Ukraine is increasingly dependent on aid, ranging from weapons to strategy. Instead of helping Ukraine stand on its own, the US and the West have turned it into a storage facility for aid. The question remains, if the US were to cut off aid tomorrow, what would happen to Ukraine? Meanwhile, while Ukraine pays the heavy toll, giants like Trump sit in the White House praising accomplishments without taking responsibility. The price that Ukraine has to pay may turn out to be a tragedy that they never chose, while those far away only reap the benefits.